Today we're sitting with Myla Pilao, the Global Director for Technology Marketing at Trend Micro, a multinational cybersecurity product company, to talk to us about cyber hygiene for kids and families. Myla is a cybersecurity expert and leads the division of Trend Micro that monitors the security threat landscape, including high profile attacks and internet security threats. She's also an active supporter and advocate for the protection of children online. Myla, welcome.
Thanks, Nathan. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Could we start first by just explaining to the audience what we mean by cyber hygiene and digital literacy for children?
Correct. I think there are two interpretations for that. One is an adult and one is for the children. So maybe definitely the overarching to me of cyber hygiene is that having to be able to practice and inspire what we call digital responsibility on the context of adults like us who are actually the ones guiding right now and for the kids as well on how they actually use it. So to me that's really the key area. How we can have a virtual space and an environment where we don't both lose sight of what we call the values or the norms and practices.
Very good. So if we kind of talk about what that means practically speaking, then are we talking about screen time for children? Are we talking about safe and unsafe practices? Oversharing? What does that look like?
I'll try to simplify it also with SEE, right? So CS for me is like at the end of the day, there must be security. The mental model should be whatever is online today will stay online forever. There's no delete, no control, no nothing, right? It's there. The E portion is a lot about education, right? We want the kids and the obviously the youth to be able to embrace and really empower themselves online, but educating is key. And the last E to me is non negotiable, which is digital ethics. We should be able to also exercise or at least guide a lot of our very young people to be able to behave ethically online. It's not just, physical, but really online. And this is really formed in the value of teaching them respect, not just to others, but also to themselves, right? So to me, those are very important. The respect to privacy, the respect to feelings, and of course, the respect to proper use of technology.
Very good. And so, why is cyber hygiene becoming a growing concern? I mean, I know it's been around for a little while, but it's starting to become more important these days. Why would you say?
I'm sure we're not new to that conversation that, especially during 2020 onwards, which is essentially the overarching pandemic that we've been to, there is a steady rise for sure of not just online activity, but also exposing the children to a lot of online digital threats. One of the things that I could probably quote is there is a growing concern because there are real negative, both physical, emotional, and technological implications of why there is this kind of discussion, right? A study by our friends from DQ Institute, who've always been championing a lot of, digital safety, said about 6 out of 10 children have regular exposure to this online threats or online attacks. So I think to me, that is really more profound way of saying that there is a growing concern because there are real world cases where children really are being subjected to this kind of threats.
So, are we talking about online threats that turn into real life
Yeah,
implications? Yeah.
yeah.
I would imagine there's also, mental health issues arising due to a poor cyber hygiene.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
impact on education. You have any? Could you elaborate on that a little bit as well?
For sure. So one of the things that you already mentioned, let's take up on the mental health, right? So that is a physical manifestation that there is a concern, which means that one of the biggest concern right now is can you actually sit a kid right now, or even us as adults, can you sit us without just multitasking or hovering to our phone, etc. So that is focus and sharpness is really lessening a little bit, right? Also the bigger issue that we're facing right now in terms of mental health is the wellness itself, right? How can we get them to concentrate? How can we get them to really remove some of these things that are there's just so attached to technology? And there's nothing wrong, it's just that it's overly So attachment. The other bigger concern when we scale up the things is also we've heard this for over many years now, cyberbullying. It is nothing new, but of course, the dent of cyberbullying right now, where it becomes more severe, right, is also very alarming. So that's one other effect. And then let's not loosen up also on the very day-to-day things. For example, practical safety. Let's say, just making sure that when you're online, you are safe, making sure that when you transfer files, when you share information, you're sharing it to a safe environment. So to me, those are the scale of probably concerns on cyber hygiene challenges.
Very good. Bringing it back to the cyberbullying just a little bit, I mean, is there
Mm.
any way that we can know if our kid is being cyberbullied, like behavioral changes or apps that we could use to help track or censor kind of what they're doing? What would you suggest?
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, I'm not a parent. So let me take it on probably on a personal level because there's a lot of multiple tips and guidance to a lot of adults like us. One of my nephew, oh my God, he's going to hear this, but it's okay. When he was very young, we didn't know that he was bullied for a couple of years, and this is like maybe 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So to me, the manifestations probably of what we've learned from that very challenging experience is number one is normally kids behave on a regular. I mean, they have regular habits. They have regular hobbies. They pretty much you can tell from day to night what they will do. The one big thing is that when they start breaking that, when they start exhibiting something that they were not doing before that they're doing right now. So that for me is a big, big sign. The second one is they try to be very reclusive, right? Especially for someone who's extrovert and it suddenly becomes so introvert, right?
Mhm.
So they don't like to handle conversation, make some conversation. So those are defining portions. And then at least on our experience, there's also physical manifestation usually, which means a big part of it is the appetite. They lose the
Mm.
appetite. They don't want to go out anymore. Things like they feel that there is something hovering around them. To me, that was the some of the key areas that we've seen so far as a manifestation.
Interesting. And in terms of an active way to kind of check that, obviously, asking your child is probably the most direct way if you have that relationship with your kid. But I would imagine there's also apps or tracking apps or
Mhm.
censoring kind of. Is there any kind of technology that can be used in the least intrusive way to keep an eye on what's happening with them?
Yeah, yeah, and then I think you brought up a topic that obviously comes close to our heart in the technology world. A lot of the tools that we have right now, both commercially and non-commercially, have far advanced mechanism to protect our kids in a very non-intrusive way, as you said. The basic one is just let's not go to very techy, but putting on your location. Tab is very, very important, even for all of us adults, right? The second portion is that there are a lot of parental controls that engages the kid to say which sites are we going to visit, what schedule do we want to build for you, right?
Mhm.
Make that an activity between you and kids when you design that application in terms of parental control. So it's not done behind their back and suddenly they can no longer view the site, right?
Mhm.
Have a conversation. Is 2 hours a time is a good one? Then we set that portion. And the third one is that there are built-in applications that have security number built in. But if God forbid, if there's an emergency, it's just one click away.
Mhm.
So make sure we install that. And again, the kids are trained not to fear those apps, but be their savior. But if they need it, don't hesitate to ping it. Right. So those are very much available right now commercially.
Very good. If we turn it around now, though,
Mhm.
and think about the bullies, are the bullies even aware that they're bullying? If your kid is one of those bullies,
Mhm.
what can parents do to help prevent them from bullying?
It's kind of tough. When we look at the cyberbullying, I think we have to make a considerable understanding that there are two victims in this situation. It is not just the person who was bullied, but as you said, the person who was also bullying is a victim. right? I'm a true believer that people always are, they have the goodness in their heart, right? So we need to understand that there are two victims in this situation. The second portion is just really to have a conversation regularly. Most of the time, by the time that you enter your door at home, right? Just as basic as how's your school, right?
Right.
How's the kids around you, right? These are sometimes mundane questions, but to the kid, if I'm given that and I just need to start talking, that's a strong question that really allow me to take on that conversation. So constantly have that conversation. It doesn't have to be a formal sit down. The second portion is we have to teach really the kids to empower themselves and to start building their confidence online. And again, building their confidence doesn't always mean being aggressive, right? Building their confidence is knowing how to treat others, but also how do you dispose, I mean, what disposition you should do when you just want to say no or stop, right? So maybe those are the key things that we really need to somehow focus on and do a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a mix of teaching empathy,
Yeah.
um, and also empathizing with
Mhm.
your kid at the same time.
Correct.
Um, yeah, it's so tricky because I remember growing up, um, with some of my friends who were essentially bullying other people,
Mm.
and none of us kind of really realized it. Some of us might have realized it a little bit, but then
Mm-hmm.
years later, having the same conversation and with those same bullies, quote unquote, they were like, I didn't even realize I was bullying. Most of the time, they don't even know. And they didn't have those conversations with their parents. Nobody was checking in with them about kind of what was going on in their day-to-day lives at school and all of that. And then um, there you go. And so it's kind of after the fact, a bit too late, but still my friends at least who felt like they were bullying others apologized,
That's good.
and all of that after the fact. I mean, many, many years later, but and this isn't cyberbullying, right? This is before cyberbullying, but I
Yeah.
wonder how much easier cyberbullying might occur, um, and discount, kind of, discounted as not being real bullying. Um, do you think there's a higher occurrence of bullying happening online compared to in person? Or, I mean, I don't know if we.
It's quite an interesting question, Nathan. I obviously do not have um, statistics on both what's happening online
Mhm.
versus offline. What I know is definitely on an online perspective, whatever the conduct of bullying is very different compared to the one on the street,
That's
right?
right.
Because in online, obviously we carry mask, right? People really have masks. They have many different persona. It made it so easy right now to create so many identity. I always say that I can be omnipotent, right? I can be talking to you right now while chatting with a friend. So to me, I think the volume is definitely wider and broader online. But we cannot disregard the fact that it is happening on the streets. It's happening in the playground. It may be happening in the school, right? So the fundamental thing is that question is what triggers, both the victim and the bully to be able to do that, right? Because that's not their natural self at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. It's a little scary too. I mean, I was talking to Bill Malik actually from Trend Micro. He's
Oh,
the
Bill.
yeah, Bill. Yeah. So we were talking about the metaverse and
Oh, yeah.
cybersecurity.
Hmm.
And I mean, this just raises the same concerns, right? I mean, there's cyberbullying already. Now, once there's a metaverse where there's even more technology and it's
Oh, yeah.
even more involved,
Hmm.
what that's going to shape into, and I feel like you're targeting the root of it, right? You're talking about the conversations that need to happen, how both the bully and the person being bullied are victims of the
Hmm.
scenario, and it really needs to be addressed at that root. Conversations and empathy with one another. So I love that, because regardless of the changes in technology, whether we have a metaverse or not, all of these points will
Yeah.
always be true. Um,
Hmm.
I think, at least.
It reminds you of it all reminds us when we're talking to our elders, no matter how young or old you're right now, it's all about values, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's all that we wanted to impose. I mean, not impose, but articulate and reinforce. Is let's just go back to the values that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though they might change a little bit with the growing technologies,
Oh
but
yeah.
the cores are there. Yeah. So in that vein, then, what are some good questions to ask kids? You touched on some of them already, but what are some good questions to ask kids to help them develop their cyber hygiene and anti-bullying practices altogether?
Okay, I'll draw from my own experience.
Yeah.
I have two nieces and two nephews. They can be very interactive and they can be crazy. I always tell them two things. One is, it's we've heard this over and over again, but it's true. Just think before you click. Think before you react. Think before you post, right? Is this end of the day gonna benefit the receiver? Right. So to me, it's fundamental. The second portion that we probably need to reinforce to the kids is practice safety all the time on time. And I'll repeat that. Practice safety all the time and on time, right? Because one part of the hat that I wear is I handle trend micro research. So metaverse and all these things comes really close to our hearts. On an attacker's point of view, it only takes about 5 to 10 seconds to get them into, and that they be able to get into you rather.
Right.
So that's why I meant by we have to make sure that on times we have safety all the time, right? And the third area is, to me, when we ask kids about cyber hygiene, is just go back to practical steps. Have you changed your passwords? Things that pretty much they really just have to know. Think about privacy, what you can and cannot share, right? And if you own it, you can share it. But if you don't own that information, why are we sharing it, right? So maybe those are four things that we can ask, kind of kids. And what also helped me, I've learned over time, is to do some scenario building, right? So when you talk to your kids, try to build scenarios. So what if
Hmm.
someone asks you this way? What would you do? Right. So it becomes really a more simulated one. And you can see the genuine sort of action that they would do if you're not around. Right.
Mhm.
So I think that those are good kind of way to simulate those questions to them.
I feel like those questions are also useful for adults.
Yes.
Sometimes we don't realize, and maybe we need a resource to help educate us on some of these questions and the
Mhm.
answers of some of these questions. Um, but you know, outside of questions, I mean, what about the devices and the apps that are being used?
Mhm.
What can we do to minimize cybersecurity breaches in that regard?
Apps have been. I remember when we started looking into the security of apps, maybe more than 15 years ago. It was very easy, right? Because you can almost attest, you can have the time to update them. But right now, it's just all over. At any given time, there's about 100 to 200 apps being created, right? So to me, the most important thing is number one is just download on the right marketplace, on the proper download platform. The second one is remember we normally scheme through the application in 3 steps. We're able to download and install that app, but we sometimes miss really are the important permissions that are already built in. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the application developers and suppliers have developed security already, right? It's just that we sometimes prefer efficiency and speed over security. So some of them are not by default, sadly. So we need to train kids. How do you look at which permission should really apply? And it's not rocket science. Permission as turn off the location, turn off the context, turn on that microphone, and all of the storage, right?
Mhm.
So those are very simple. And the third one, I think, in the use of application and devices, it's non-negotiable that they have to have built-in security. There's nothing that will protect you if this blanket is not there, right? So most of the time that's the first thing we uninstall, but in this time and age, security really is our best friend, pretty much.
And it's probably tricky to kind of incorporate this advice sometimes, right? I mean, if your child
Mhm.
is just has free reign with their phone, and there's this new app that came out, social media app, and all their friends are getting it, and so they
Yeah.
just download it themselves. Like you said, speed over looking over the security settings or the permissions. It's just click yes, yes, yes. I want to use this app. They don't look at the permissions.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything that we can do to help solve issues that might arise, after the fact. Let's say they've installed it. What practices are good to work with your
Okay.
children in that regard?
To me, the number one is the kids don't have access to the devices, right? The devices is pretty much owned and monitored by the adults. So one thing key is that if they want applications, if they want some of these tools installed, they have to do it with the adult, right? Because you're correct, we cannot expect the kids to really go through those portions, right? So that, to me, that's a number one thing. The second portion, as adults, we need to be able to gate that too. We need to be able to put that permissions in all the devices that they do, that they cannot just automatically download the tools and apps that
Right.
they have. In the event, okay, in the event that they're able, as you said, it's an after effect already, the key thing right now is to make sure number one is uninstall immediately some of these informations or some of these applications. Do a runtime scanning. Make sure that you scan it to make sure that nothing else is left, right? But that portion is assuming that it was breached, right? One of the day-to-day things that they can do is just literally get your phone or whatever device that you're doing and just do a regular scan and update so that you can see what is the vulnerability that you have. Are there unsecured applications that they suddenly downloaded without proper protection? So normally, a lot of the security scanning takes not more than a minute already. So that's the daily thing that we adults should do, so that in every device that they use, we have that peace of mind that we've done all the hygiene check before we hand it off to the kids.
Perfect. Yeah, and I would imagine that kind of gated procedure would also mitigate any issues with downloading apps outside of, when you say proper marketplaces, you mean, with Google, like the
Yeah,
Google Play
Google.
Store, Apple's iStore, like all that stuff, as opposed to other sources, just a website online that doesn't have
Correct.
anything checked.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you would have that. But
Mhm.
again, it happens, right? Let's say if the only way that they can download an app is by signing in, and they need your password to sign in to download that app, for example, at a specific marketplace,
Mhm.
I wondered, does that encourage them to go and sneakily download it from a website that provides it outside? Is there ways to change that on the phone settings to not allow those kinds of apps to be installed? Um, you know, can a parent set a password, I guess, for the app itself? Is that what you mean when you say the device is owned by the adult?
Mhm.
Does it go that far as well, in terms of, okay, if you're going to install anything on this phone, you need
Mhm.
my password that you don't
Yeah, yeah,
you don't
and
have?
I get you. They can be very tricky, right? We've seen a lot of horror stories.
Yeah.
Maybe the best protection definitely is that if they are using a valid and an active security solutions in any of the devices, they for one should not even worry about their kids attempting to go to a website that is very dangerous, right? Because that's the work of supposedly your security solution
Right.
provider. That's why I said that's non-negotiable. So they do the first job. The second portion is authentication. So, what if it's valid? There's nothing wrong, but again, set up a lot of authentication, like a two-tier authentication, so they don't just get your password, which I'm sure they can creatively be able to do that, but do another tier of authentication, whether it's OTP, whether it's your fingerprint, so that there is proper control and steps also, right? And the third one is non-negotiable. Do an inventory all the time, right? My nephew just downloaded a Roblox. To me, is okay, but it takes a lot of weight and access. So to me, have that conversation. Is this something that you need? Is this something that you want? Get them engaged in choosing the right one. The technology is one, but also really getting them involved rather than in the past. It's always control, right? Don't do this. Don't do that.
Keep them involved. Yeah. If we think about also, public or school Wi-Fi,
Mm.
um, is that a concern at all? Because we're connected to the internet everywhere that we go now. What other kinds of issues or threats emerge when children's devices are connected to public Wi-Fi?
One of the things that the pandemic has brought us a little bit more in a beneficial way is really having a really really good infrastructure. When we all started, of course, we don't have this. And the first organizations that obviously jump into that are really the academe, the schools, because they know that they have to be able to protect a lot of these kids. So, number one, to your questions of whether they are equally vulnerable when they use Wi-Fi, yes, of course, right? Even in a corporate network, there's still a level of vulnerability involved. So, to me, when we encourage the kids to be able to use the public Wi-Fi or the school Wi-Fi, let's give them I think much of the protection has already been built in. The rest is like this is like a marathon race or a rally, right? We pass now the baton to the user, and what practices do they exhibit so that they can also be protected, right?
Right.
So some of these things, for example, is that when you we have to recognize that if we are using a public network, whether it's school or just at a cafe or a guest of one company, we have to be cognizant that let's not do or transact anything that we think is really critical and important. For example, sharing my boss the name list I got from an event, right?
Right.
So we have to be cognizant that once the higher the sensitivity of the information, that needs to be done in a corporate or a closed environment. And similarly, when we put it in the analogy of the kids, it's the same thing, right? So if you need to be able to share this information, etc., it has to be in a closed somehow environment. But much of them, as I said, have been somehow, the good news is there's a couple of built-in security infrastructure right now that sits there.
Very good. Yeah. Touching again on kind of oversharing of information or sensitive information and how kids need to also be aware of that. Do you have any other tips or advice, maybe when it comes to social media, sharing on social media, or the settings on social media? The all the photo apps that exist now. Should kids, some tips on how kids should be careful
Mhm.
in that regard when it comes to, again, oversharing, and tips on what they can do to either um, prevent the oversharing from happening or to really know what they're doing.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, you're touching on something that I think we will get into a controversial conversation with a lot of the kids right now because pretty much they share everything, right? That's pretty much where we are. To me, again, I will go back to the point of conversation. Is this something? Number one for me is that is this your property, right? And I think that that line is so blurred right now. If I take a picture of you right now and me at the moment, by default, if I want to post it online, by default, is that I should ask you if you're comfortable because it's not just me, right?
Right.
So similarly for the kids, if there's something that they want to share online and it's just not them, give the courtesy to the others that it is okay with you, right? Because there's a lot of mechanisms right now to blur it, to remove it, to edit it, right? The second portion is I always go back and say, is this something that will benefit? Is this something that will put somebody in a negative way or be looked at negative way, right? So it's always the afterthought, right? In terms of technology, there are a couple of settings already there that are already built in. For instance, if I'm already using my camera right now, there is already a lot of technology that I can do that live update in one click. So
Mhm.
you can disable that, right? So that if you accidentally been walking around and suddenly people know that you're in the grocery, yeah, you can set that portion, disable that, right? So there are a lot of those permissions that gives us a little bit more safety. The other one is from photo sharing from your personal device or to the cloud,
Mhm.
right? So to me, those are things that we need to really pay a little bit more attention, especially on our devices. So they are already built in. Sadly, we don't somehow use it or at least pay attention to, oh, they're there, I didn't know, right? So the sharing part, not just on the photo, but also on your device and also on your storage are very, very important. They should be by default disabled.
I would imagine location also, when you post anything,
Mhm.
on an app to app basis, they might have settings as well, right? To
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
allow the locations to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot to look out for.
Yeah,
A
it's a
lot
lot to
of
look up
tips.
for sharing one picture, right?
Exactly, if is what you're sharing going to put you in direct danger? I wonder if having that kind of conversation
Yeah,
with your child is also important, just so they think about it before they post something. Is
yeah.
this going to tell somebody that I don't want to know? where I am currently and all of
Hmm.
that. So because all the apps kind of do that by default right now, if you don't
Hmm.
specifically tell them not to.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of tips. It's a lot of great advice. It's a lot of things that we need to incorporate into our daily lives when we have children, even for ourselves. Is there anywhere that we can go to help us with that? I know Trend Micro has a lot of different tools and resources now that are being built or that have been built with
Hmm.
cyber hygiene. Could you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure, thank you. So on the education portion, we're very passionate about that. Our organization is pretty much built on education for the last 30 plus years. As we learn, as we test, and we make mistakes, we try to educate. And through education, we're able to really pass on some of the things that I've been telling you for a couple of minutes now. Part of the education that we have is we have a promise to ourselves to really protect internet the kids and their families online. It's something that we've been doing for almost, I guess, 10 to 15 years right now. um, Last year we've launched what we call Cyber Academy. It's part of our internet safety for kids and family platform. This is a 2 to 3 minute interactive, fun, and very sweet education program that is catered to parents, adults, teachers, and even for sure the kids, right, in different ages and category. So we've listened a lot to what people are saying, that stop giving me PowerPoint, stop giving me a 20-minute presentation. So these are interactive. I'm sure you will also enjoy doing that test. So what we did is an assessment. So again, kids know, oh, what is my risk level, and then teach them. So you're more vulnerable because of A, B, C, right? So that's one of the things that we've been doing. It's been translated in many different countries. So languages rather. So it's really free. It's and use it, maximize it, and repurpose it. That's all we encourage even the schools and the teachers and the parents to do. That's
Yeah.
definitely one. The second portion is we have a lot of online free tools where they can just really download, and they're obviously very safe. Number one is, one of the things I always get asked is, Myla, I don't know whether this website is good or not. I cannot never tell it. And my answer to them is, that's correct. It is not something native. You cannot see a website and just claim it's bad, right? So there is a tool that we have right now that allows you to check it before you even proceed or do any transaction, right? And now we call it our site safety center. So you can just put the website there and it gives you the confidence, go ahead, or no, don't block it, right? The other one I've talked about is, part of hygiene is building the regular day-to-day sort of discipline. We have online scanning tools for your mobile, for your desktop, or even for your big computers, right? That allows you to really do a daily scanning, so you know how much have been installed or otherwise, right? So to me, those are three important sort of. They're not just free, but they're safe. But we'd love the community to really use it and give us also the feedback so we can continue to iterate it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I had the opportunity to look at the academy because, as you said, it's free. So I was looking at the I love the questions that it provides. So there was like a great video that introduced everything, but then I love the kind of interactive portion. Right, it's really built for, like you said, the parents, the teachers to have the conversations with the kids. So it's first and foremost for the kids to watch and enjoy and learn. But then it also provides the tools to make it easier for the adults to
Mhm.
ask those important questions and to build those conversations with their kids. And I loved that aspect of it. I saw it and I was like, this is good. This helps me. I don't always know what I need to ask, and so
Yeah.
this is really good. So I really appreciate that and all the
Yeah,
tools.
and I think the credit there, Nathan, is really the work of many, many Internet Safety for Kids volunteers here in Canada. We're obviously very much available if you need any one of us to train you to go to the school, just to have a regular 10 or 20-minute conversations. A lot of my peers that I think the word right now is shout out are definitely there. Debbie, Caitlin, Frank, Melanie, and all of these people have been, Antoine, would lovingly support really the safety of our kids and our families here in Canada. So tap us, connect with us, and let's have a conversation to teach the kids to be not just online, but be awesome online.
I love that. Thank you so much, Trend Micro. I mean, you guys. been obviously in the cybersecurity game for a very, very long time. So it's fantastic to see initiatives like this as well to help our families and children and everybody. So thank you again. Did you have any questions for us, Myla, before? Anything else you wanted to touch on before I let you go? Did we miss
Nothing,
anything?
nothing much. I guess we've covered it, and I love the conversation of circling into both technology safety, but also how do we kind of hopefully. To me, it's always whatever we're doing right now is maybe will not serve us in our current generation, but we need to invest the same amount because it's going to benefit the next online generation, right? So it's all about
Absolutely.
protecting them in the future too.
Absolutely. Okay, then with that, I think we can end our conversation. Thank you again so much. It was wonderful having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks.